So on this Women's Day, we honor the legacy of the 20,000 brave women who marched to the Union buildings in 1956 in protest against the oppressive past laws of apartheid. And their courage paved the way forward for the freedoms that we now hold. But today, nearly 70 years later, South African women are still marching, but this time for safety and for dignity and for justice. And so on this Women's Day, we're going to be pausing not just to reflect, but to ask, what is the value of Women's Day when women still live in fear, and how much longer must women endure violence, fear and silence? So to be part of this conversation, Cassandra Dorasamy, campaigner at Amnesty International South Africa, joins us for more, as well as Siam Samai, of course, from Women's Legal Centre as well. Good morning to the both of you, and thank you for being part of this chat. Cassandra, let me start with you. We've heard some sentiments being echoed through statements from Amnesty International and various other organizations and activists, really just saying that Women's Day feels hollow in light of the ongoing violence. How would you describe the state of safety and justice for women in South Africa today?
Good morning, Liesel, and good morning to your listeners, and good morning to Ms. Samai. I think we all are very cognizant of the difficulties that women face in South Africa, of the fact that women are constantly looking over their shoulder, constantly in fear of walking alone, constantly in fear of being threatened or assaulted. This is a daily reality that doesn't reflect the right that women have to live in safety and dignity. I think all of us can, in our own spaces, have known that experience. Wherever we come from in South Africa, are familiar with that experience and that dread that you might feel, say, if you're alone at night as a woman. So I think reflecting 70 years later, like you said, is this the state that the 20,000 women marched for? Is this the reality that women in South Africa have fought for? And the answer is no, and that's why we continue to fight for until all women feel safe in their own home.
Well, Cassandra, thank you for those opening remarks. Siam, I know you're representing the South African Women Lawyers Association, and so thank you for your time as well. On the back of what Cassandra's echoed, and even if we look at the state's approaches, given the key failures in some of the legislation and just the realities on the ground, in line with the National Strategic Plan on GBVF, what are you observing? What is that legal reform that's needed as we speak?
Well, as Cassandra has indicated, gender-based violence is a crisis. It's been a crisis for many, many years. And that is why we do have the strategic plan. But not enough convictions. I'm going to go to the core of it. Survivors face trauma against injustices, secondary traumas. We have seen what has happened over the past couple of months with many of these trials, and what survivors or victims of violence have to go through. And we need to be able to deal with that. But I think a fundamental issue besides GBV, because it's got to do with the core of economic inequalities, but in particularly where women is concerned, there remains 30 years on in our democracy, 70 years on since the march, a gender pay gap, high unemployment among women, especially rural women. And we're talking about our farm workers, we're talking about sex workers, we're talking about our domestic workers within the urban and rural areas. And then from the legal fraternity, I don't just represent South African women lawyers, but also I come from, and I'm a member of the National Association of Democratic Lawyers, where many can't afford to even go to court. And many might say, but the domestic violence interdict is free. You can just go to court, but nobody looks at the cost of that survivor or victim coming from a community in Khayelitsha, in Mitchell's Plain, having to take a taxi, having to navigate and ensuring the children still goes to school, the unpaid care work, before you even get to court. And that is why there is such a high revision rate from survivors pulling back, because it's an economic link. And so even though we do have many, many laws, 30 years, let me not say that things have not happened. We need to also acknowledge and give tribute to the women that has walked in 1956, because they for me and for many others. People like Charlotte Muteke, Sissy Gould, Jane Gould, Amina Gould, Ray Alexander, Elizabeth Martin King, Elizabeth Abrams, Amina Pahad. Why did they die for us? And then also to acknowledge people like Teresa Solomons, they just died too. I mean, this is the history. These women ensured that those rights in the Constitution is there. And so we need tougher enforcement of GBV laws.
Yeah,
we need equal play enforcement. And it remains a challenge 30 years on.
Yeah, absolutely. Justice delayed is justice denied, and one life lost is one life too many. And thank you for also those opening remarks. Cassandra, you've heard how the economic disparities, also impact lived reality in South Africa. Even if we look at the statistical data that is available, we've seen, some of the quarterly stats have been released, and there's been a response to SABC leaving out the disaggregated statistics for women and children in the latest crime report. Now, I wonder if you could speak to that, because beyond that, obviously, we're looking at what message that sends out, right? You also want to put a name to a statistic and personalize it and humanize it, because we heard how Siam described, what women and the marginalized go through, perhaps just to get justice. Police stations turning survivors away, protection orders being ignored, poor investigation work. This is speaking to a larger systemic failure of the CJS.
Absolutely. And I think Samai really hit the nail on the head when she said that we need tougher enforcement, because like what has been said, we have had progressive legislation. We've had the women's movement really fight for tougher laws, but that has not led to implementation, unfortunately. And when there is that gap in reality between progressive laws and people's lived realities, then there needs to be more investment in that local level of the culture of SAPs, the culture of these units that are meant to respond when there are instances of gender-based violence. So when you talk about putting names to statistics, it is such an important point, because we see the large statistics. We know that it's 115 women who are raped on average every day in South Africa annually, and 15 women who die every day in South Africa on average annually. But who are these people behind it? It could be our friends, it could be our family. And I remember a time when one of the rallying calls for women in South Africa was "Am I next?" Hashtag am I next? And that's not a question that women should be sitting with. So bringing it back to, like you said, that systemic issue within SAPS, there needs to be a better resources for the police to carry out proper and appropriate investigations. And we know at the moment that the highest attrition rate in the criminal justice system is at the police level, at the investigative stage. Yeah. So we need to see better capacitating of police to do their jobs and to enforce the laws. But also to speak to the absence of the disaggregated statistics in the last crime stats report. What's missing when we don't have the proper stats and statistics is a misattribution of the problem. In order to have specific intervention that deals directly with the root causes of our issues, we need to have the correct information, and to have a crisis
Cassandra?
of GBV. Yes.
Just on that point, I just want to bring Siam back in for the interest of time, and you made a valid point there, because Siam, how would you then weigh in on, the criminal justice system at large? There's been calls for growing transparency from SAPS, from the NPA, other institutions as well, to restore public trust in these systems. Talk to us a little bit more about that, even just allegations made by KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mgonazi, why it's so important to treat this with such urgency as well.
Well, I think I love what Cassandra has said. It's got to do with a deep cultural change also that has to happen within SAPS, because sadly, even within SAPS, members commit a femicide. And we need to be able to speak to that and speak what is the culture within that and what has been done to be able to change. SABC is more times than not the first point of assistance for many victims of violence across, not just GBV. And so we need to be able to ensure that there is proper victim support units. Many has closed. We need to be able to ensure that there's also communities that speaks to these victim support units to be able to give support, to be able to ensure that SABC is within that community so that there's a broader form of accountability. I do think that more times than not, GBV, many victims are sent to the court, even though there was an assault. There isn't a first instance of assault even just being opened and just being sent to the particular court and not doing the broader investigation. We have trained people or SABC individuals so many times, but sadly it needs to continue because we still see GBV victims being turned away. And so even if they do get to the court system, they have to do the application. There are, officers, domestic violence officers that will be able to assist. But at the end of the day, SABC gets the service again to be able to serve that document because many can't afford to go to the sheriff to be able to say that they need to serve this on the perpetrator.
Yeah.
And all of those people don't go through the practical steps of what a survivor has to go through to be able to survive the system, not just what happened to her.
Absolutely, and there's often secondary
Yes.
trauma as well. I need to wrap up. So from both of you, parting shots. Let me start with you, and then Cassandra will end off. On the symbolic day, what message do you have for the women of South Africa who feel unseen, unsafe, unheard?
Well, I just want to say, there are many NGOs and civil society organizations that will continue also keeping the state accountable. There is also structures, because as you know, I'm a commissioner, the Commission for Gender Equality, that is continuing to push for gender equality in this country and to be able to access these Chapter 9s. But just to say that the women of 1956 marched so we could walk free. And we need to remember that. It's our duty to make sure that women today can walk without fear and walk into a future where there is equality, not just formal, but substantive equality. And I'm so happy to see people like Cassandra that's here, that's going to, continue doing the fight through Amnesty, through NGOs, to be able to ensure that there's somebody out there to be able to assist them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Siam. Cassandra, parting shot very quickly.
Thank you, Liesl. If I may, I want to turn it around to a message to the men in South Africa. Disrupt harmful social and cultural norms, disrupt toxic masculinity, disrupt the culture of violence. That's what will make women safer in South Africa.
All right. Thank you to the both of you for joining us and for continuing to highlight the plight of women in our country on this Women's Day, reminding us that commemoration without transformation actually means nothing or very little. South Africa Women Lawyers Association, Siam Samai, joining us, as well as Cassandra Dorasamy, campaign at Amnesty International South Africa, just joining us for that call to action, of course, for urgency, transparency, and true accountability on this Women's Day and beyond.